morning and welcome to the Law and Crime Network. I'm in for Jesse Weber for this edition of the Morning Docket. It is January 4th and we have got a lot to get to today. Two major trials getting underway on Monday. We're going to walk you through those, plus a recap of day one of the Jeremiah Monell trial out of New Jersey. He is accused of brutally stabbing his wife to death as one of their children watched. We're going to bring you all of the highlights from yesterday's first day in court. But first, let's kick things off with today's top crime stories.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. An inmate in Florida and several corrections officers are in hot water after an investigation revealed the inmate received special treatments from guards in exchange for tax advice. The investigation conducted by the Orange County Corrections Department found that 61-year-old inmate Robert Patchen was given special privileges, such as being allowed to eat Chinese takeout, access to the internet, and sitting in the guard tower in exchange for tax advice, help with student loans, and help with mortgages. The alleged corruption came to light after two other inmates wrote letters to the Sentinel complaining about the special treatment. All of the officers implicated in the scheme have resigned or retired from their posts, and it's unclear if Patchen will face charges. A man in Florida is under arrest after he allegedly shot his wife and her parents in front of his young children. 34-year-old William Brian Stillwell reportedly showed up uninvited to the home of his in-laws, Robert and Naima Snellgrove, with a 9mm pistol and shot them both, as well as his wife, Mona Stillwell, in front of his twin 5-year-old children. Stillwell reportedly told authorities Mona cheated on him with his best friend. All three victims suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and Stillwell now faces several felonies, including 3 counts of attempted murder.
You want her in the passenger seat? That's our officer in the passenger seat.
Back here. Okay, back here. Move. Put the gun down now.
Hey, come over here. Come over.
Authorities in Arkansas released daring dashcam footage of an officer risking her life to save a 1-year-old child during a tense, armed standoff with her father. The suspect, 43-year-old Ferris Deloney, reportedly fired a shot at a Walmart parking lot in Little Rock before taking off with his infant child, leading officers on a chase. When Deloney finally pulled over, he reportedly took the child hostage at gunpoint. That's when Officer Brittany Godfrey successfully pleaded for the father to release the child.
Sir, can I please just get the baby out the car? Can I get the baby?
Deloney now faces charges of kidnapping, aggravated assault, and endangering the welfare of a minor. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Well, let's talk about some big trials getting underway Monday that we will be bringing you live here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Let's start in California, where the McStay family murders will be getting underway. James Merritt, on trial for murdering this family of 4. His business associate was Charles McStay, McStay's wife, and their 2 young sons. There is a photo of the family right there. Now, the family's car was found at the Mexican border days after they disappeared, but their bodies were not found until a year after their disappearance, and that was in a shallow grave in the desert. Now, Merritt was arrested and charged. The allegation here that he did it because of financial troubles, and that in the days after the murders, he wrote checks to himself, $21,000 worth of checks from McStay's account. Now, the defense is claiming it wasn't Merritt, it was a third business partner who did this. Again, this is going to get underway Monday in California. Today, we are expecting one more pre-trial hearing. That's going to be used to decide whether or not to unseal a search warrant declaration that was used to collect DNA from Merritt's brother. So we will stay on top of what happens in that pre-trial hearing today. And again, this is going to be getting underway Monday. We'll be bringing you the opening arguments live. Our other big trial out of Michigan, you may have heard about this one. James Dalton, an Uber driver who went on a killing spree, killing 6 people, shooting and badly injuring 2 others. This happened back in February 2016 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He faces a total of 16 counts in this trial. Now, as I said, he was a driver for Uber. He was a relatively new driver. When he went on this 5-hour shooting rampage, he did it in between doing pickups for Uber. His victims apparently random, and in a police interview after his arrest, there you see the victims on your screen, Dalton told police his Uber app had taken over his body and mind. He said that a symbol had popped up on the app when he opened it, a symbol that looked like a devil, and as soon as he pressed it, the problems began. Now, back in July, a judge threw out Dalton's statements to police on the basis that his Miranda rights were violated because Dalton told the officer some 40 times during the course of that interview he didn't want to talk. We have some more on the background of this trial right now. Take a look.
A former Michigan Uber driver could get life in prison for a 2016 shooting rampage that left 6 people dead. Prosecutors say Jason Dalton killed 6 and critically injured 2, including a teenage girl. The frenzy began while Dalton was transporting a passenger from Kalamazoo College. Dalton claimed he began seeing strange symbols on his phone, and a sensation came over his body. He began driving erratically through the streets, frightening the rider, who was eventually able to escape. Dalton told police he drove back to his home and began preparing his weapons. He said he drove to an apartment complex intending to pick up a rider. Instead, he found 25-year-old Tiana Carruthers. Dalton shot her multiple times. Tiana managed to survive. Dalton continued, reportedly fatally gunning down 53-year-old Richard Smith and his son, 17-year-old Tyler Smith, at a car dealership around 10 p.m. The final shooting occurred less than 20 minutes later, when Dalton allegedly shot 4 women and a young girl in a Cracker Barrel parking lot. Sisters-in-law Mary Lou and Mary Jo Nye, Dorothy Brown, and Barbara Hawthorne were among the dead. Barbara's family friend, a 14-year-old, sustained a gunshot wound to the skull, but managed to survive. In interviews with police, Dalton said it was like it wasn't even himself. He further explained to a psychiatrist, "It almost seemed like my phone could control me," despite reportedly having no history of psychiatric delusions. In spite of his claims, he was found competent to stand trial in April 2016. An appeals court threw out the confession Dalton made to police, citing Miranda violations. Dalton pleaded not guilty to the charges. His defense attorney has expressed intent to use an insanity defense. Dalton faces 6 counts of murder, 8 weapons charges, and 2 counts of assault with intent to murder. For the Law and Crime Network, I'm Aaron Keller.
All right, well, that should be a very interesting trial. As I said, it begins Monday morning out of Michigan. We will be bringing it to you live right here on Law and Crime. Well, let's get to the other big trial we were on all day yesterday, and that's in New Jersey. That's the murder trial against Jeremiah Monell. Yesterday was day 1. Now, Monell is charged with murdering his estranged wife, Tara O'Shea Watson. She was 35 years old at the time, and this murder happened allegedly at her home in Commercial Township, New Jersey. This was back in December of 2016. Now, an autopsy report showed that Tara had been stabbed dozens of times in her chest, in her abdomen and back. Prosecutors say it was 48 times. Now, after the murder, Monell led police on a 2-week manhunt. He was eventually found in a wooded area where he was arrested and later brought in for his charges and arraignment. Another allegation in all of this is that the couple's 12-year-old son told police he had woken up when he heard the sound of a bang on the floor. He went and saw his father slamming O'Shea Watson, his mother, onto the floor and choking her. Now, it's a lot of interesting details in this case for sure. First of all, yesterday we found out that Monell's defense says it wasn't him. The couple had had a very rocky relationship over the years, and according to Tara's friends, he had been extremely abusive to her over the course of their decade-long marriage and relationship, and we know she had taken out several restraining orders against him. During day 1, we not only heard openings, but we also heard from some law enforcement officials. Joining me to break this all down today is Law and Crime's own Judge Ashley Willcott. Thanks so much for being here, Ashley,
Absolutely.
as always.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let's talk about how court got underway yesterday, because maybe a bit of a rocky start for Monell when he showed up 90 minutes late to court. He said that that he was delayed because he hadn't been, given all of the things that he needed. And then on top of that, he began complaining, saying he was getting motion sickness because a court officer standing near him was swaying back and forth. Now, I have to ask you, as a judge, I imagine this doesn't sit well, first impressions when we're kicking off a trial.
Right. So, Stacy, here's what's interesting is a judge has to manage his or her courtroom. That's their responsibility. And you have to have the defendant present or deal with it if they're not going to be present. And so I think for me it's communication. So if somebody comes to me and says, listen, this is why my client's late, this is what's going on, then I can manage it and handle it and say, this is how long we're going to wait. And I don't get as frustrated by what's going on in the courtroom. However, if I don't know and the defendant's just late, it is very frustrating as a judge. Now, the second piece of it, and he said, it made me anxious to see the bailiff moving around like that. That is something that, again, communication. If someone says that to me, then I, as the judge, can manage my courtroom and determine what's the appropriate action, if any. Do you tell the bailiff you need to stand still? Do you say that a defendant, look, you just have to deal with the surroundings of the courtroom that we have? It's a small courtroom. If nobody communicates it to me, I would be so frustrated. But you can't let that interfere with your objective job as the judge.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of jurors, how do you think this plays to them? I mean, nobody likes being kept waiting, first of all, even though we know there's a lot of waiting around for jurors in general when they're on a case. But, how do jurors read this?
Oh, gosh, they hate waiting. And if they find out it's because the defendant was late, for instance, although they shouldn't hold that against the defendant, their frustration level is going to be greater as well. And they are going to think, are you kidding? I had to be here on time, or face the penalties of the court. Why doesn't he have to be here on time?
Yeah. Well, we know that in terms of his statement about anxiety over the bailiff, the judge said, okay, maybe you're hungry, get some lunch. The openings ended up being pushed to the afternoon, and that's where we're going to get started today, going back to review those opening statements. So let's start with the prosecutor.
State police are contacted. They respond out to the area, and they begin their investigation. Part of that investigation was going around to some neighbors to see if anybody had heard anything, if anybody had seen anything. And they find a couple of people, Paige and Heather Oslin, who also live nearby. The night before, on the 18th, they were out walking their dogs, and they go by 7901 Raymond, and they hear the defendant and Tara in the midst of an argument. The state police also search the house, and during their search of the house, they find numerous pieces of evidence. There's the carpet that's soaked with blood. There are some bins with blood splatter on them. There is a cardboard box saturated with blood. There are some other blood stains that were on numerous other pieces of other articles in the house. In the kitchen, behind the stove, they locate 2 knives. The knives had blood on them. The knives were collected as evidence.
Well, that was the prosecutor's opening argument as he seeks to prove that Jeremiah Monell murdered his wife, Tara O'Shea Watson, stabbing her dozens of times on the floor of her home. And this as the couple's 12-year-old son watched. Wow, that part certainly struck me the first time I read it, and I think jurors as well. Judge Ashley Willcott still with us. So, you and I were just talking as this played. Will we hear from the 12-year-old son, little Jeremiah? I think that's a big question, and that could be a very big moment for prosecutors if he does take the stand.
Absolutely. That eyewitness is key to the prosecution's case. And unless, Stacy, they can come up with a hearsay exception that prevents the child from having to testify and they can use the statement instead, the child's going to have to testify. But it was pointed out yesterday, nowhere did they say in opening, you're going to hear from that child.
Right, which is a good point. Maybe they're still working it out. We don't know. Obviously, we will be staying tuned for that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, much more from opening statements. We'll hear the rest of what prosecutors had to say and the defense's argument. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Morning Docket with Jesse Weber. I'm Stacy Delicat in for Jesse today. Well, we are talking about the Jeremiah Monell trial out of New Jersey. Yesterday was day one. Today there is a break. Court will not resume until next week. So we are going back and breaking down all of the highlights and analyzing of what happened as well. Just before the break, we began playing you some of the prosecutor's opening arguments. Let's go ahead and play the rest of those.
They also find a pair of jeans in a small area that's used as a bedroom right next to the kitchen. Blood on the jeans. During the course of the investigation, a detective speaks with little Jeremiah. And during the course of that interview, little Jeremiah tells the detective what he saw. He saw his father assaulting his mother, choking her. He saw his father stab his mother again and again, over and over.
He did that identification. He's also the one who's involved in a blood splatter, Your Honor. Okay. So that they also took parts and other parts of the investigation that were not what I would say expert testimony investigation. The state did agree to kind of bifurcate their testimony to allow for them to testify on one part as what they consider a fact witness, and then the other part as what possibly as an expert witness in those cases. Also, in Detective Hughes' report, there were some conclusionary statements that I thought were out of scope of his expertise. The state did state that they will not be going. He did have an identification. He's also the one.
His father stabbed his mother again and again, over and over. They also find a pair of jeans in a small area that's used as a bedroom right next to the kitchen. Blood on the jeans. During the course of the investigation, a detective speaks with little Jeremiah.
So there you saw Jeremiah Monell on the screen as the prosecutor delivered his opening arguments, talking about the murder weapons here, how blood was found all over, how some of the knives were found in the kitchen, I believe behind the stove. So Ashley, Judge Ashley Willcott, and our own Law and Crime host with me here in studio. This sounds like it was a pretty gruesome crime scene, although when the neighbors first arrived with little Jeremiah, they thought maybe something had happened. She died in her sleep. They quickly realized there was blood all over. And you got to imagine, and we know we will hear a testimony about this, that this guy's fingerprints are all over too. They were estranged. Although he didn't live there, he did spend time in the house. But, the crime scene, and I know we're going to hear from a lot of crime scene experts, seems they would have left a lot of clues about this.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. It was a violent crime. There's information that she had a restraining order out against this defendant as the estranged husband. And so it was really a furied killing. And all of that's going to leave a lot of evidence. When you hear the prosecution opening, I can't help but feel like they have it all wrapped up with a little bow, and it's going to be easy to prove, but maybe not. We're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people were surprised yesterday when we heard that the defense will be saying it wasn't him. Again, yes, could you argue that his fingerprints or DNA were in the house because he was the children of the father and he was there, I think, fixing a car or doing some work anyway. But still, their history together, their past, I mean, that certainly does not, help him out in any way. And the fact she had just, filed one last restraining order a little bit before this.
Right, I agree with you, Stacy. So he looks good for the crime. Now, I can tell you, arguably, okay, so they proved that there's blood on the weapon and his palm prints on that. Well, maybe his story is he came in after the fact, saw that she'd been killed, freaked out, picked it up, put it away. We just don't know yet.
Right. I mean, anything could have happened, I guess, and you can, as a defense attorney, come up with all sorts of theories. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will bring you the rest of the opening statements from yesterday. We'll be right back. Stick around. Welcome back. I'm Stacy Delicat in for Jesse. This morning we're talking about the Jeremiah Monell trial out of New Jersey. Monell charged with viciously stabbing his estranged wife to death. This as one of their children, 12-year-old little Jeremiah, watched on. Now, Monell, if convicted, could face life in prison without parole. At one point, he was offered a plea, but turned that down. We'll get to that a little bit later. But first, now, let's go to the first witness we heard from on the stand yesterday. He was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive at the scene at Tara O'Shea Watson's home after her murder. His name is Sergeant John Dehart. He's with the New Jersey State Police.
Sergeant, after you made those observations, the room that's, if you're looking at the house, to the left, you described as the kitchen?
Sir.
With seating. And I believe you already described your observations of that room. Did you see anything specifically of note when you made your observations?
Again, I noticed the table as well as a curtain that was hanging. I saw the refrigerator and just the other items in the kitchen itself.
Did you actually go into the kitchen?
I did not.
Were you later made aware of certain biological evidence that was located in the kitchen?
I was.
Well, that's Sergeant John Dehart of the New Jersey State Police, one of the first to arrive at the scene after authorities were called. He talks about seeing the victim, Tara O'Shea Watson, on the floor. He talks about the slit to her throat, puncture wounds. He also gives some other details about the home. For the most part, pretty straightforward testimony from a law enforcement official. Judge Ashley Willcott, did you think anything was particularly remarkable about this testimony?
No, but it was very detailed, and so I can only assume now that we know the defendant's defense is I didn't do it, the prosecution is putting all the details out, I think, to eliminate the possibility that there was any other suspect or defendant that was there. And so what they've done is said this is exactly the layout of the home, the size of the home, the doors can see each other. So I think they're at this point just setting the stage.
Yeah, and we know that that will be the defense, that it wasn't him. Will be interesting to see later on in the trial how they intend to prove that. Obviously, you know, prosecutors will say he knew the house well, they were married, though estranged, his children lived there, you know, they found the knives behind the stove. You know, I guess anyone could stash knives behind the stove, although if you're going to do that, you know, why stash them in the house anyway? But that's a whole other thing in terms of covering one's tracks. Let's go now to another officer we heard from yesterday, Detective Eric Crane, also with the New Jersey State Police.
Yes, sir. It's a photograph that I took of one of the entrance doors to the residence.
Okay, looking at that right now, do you know which entrance door that was?
I have to look at the overall photograph, sir.
Yes, you look at S63 if you can identify the photograph, or identify which door is it.
Yes, sir. If I was looking at the front of the residence, it would be the entrance door to the left-hand side, my left, as I face the residence.
And again, is that you actually took that photograph?
Yes, sir.
And that's an accurate representation of the condition of the door on the date that you took that photograph?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would ask that S73 be entered as evidence.
Objections? No.
Now, S74 was already entered as evidence. Which doorway is that?
As it would be, as if I were facing the residence, the doorway to the right, entrance doorway to the right.
Upon completing your...
Right, Detective Eric Crane testifying to what he saw at the scene, Tara O'Shea Watson's body wrapped in the blanket, the stab wounds, similar to what we heard from the last sergeant who was on the stand. Now, we didn't get to talk too much about the defense opening statement, but I can tell you that it was rather brief. They basically said their client didn't do it, and they tried to sort of discredit the couple's 12-year-old son, little Jeremiah, before we've even heard anything from him. So, Judge Ashley Willcott, I mean, was that your impression, too? they're saying, you know, kids don't always know what they're asking. They don't always know what the answer is. That they're trying to say from the get-go, look, you can't believe what this kid says he saw.
Absolutely, and I think they're going to talk about the suggestibility. So we know from testimony already that one of the detectives interviewed the child, and I think defense, based on their opening, is going to say, listen, he suggested the answers, and he didn't do it in a way that elicited exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, and we were just talking before about how the 12-year-old's testimony could be really pivotal in this because if he saw it with his own eyes, I mean, plus, you know, the trauma a child must experience. I mean, I think it's interesting. This isn't the 5-year-old daughter that says she saw it. It's the 12-year-old. And, you know, yes, children, teens certainly can embellish or make things up, but you would think that a 12-year-old would know a little bit more, you know, what they saw.
Absolutely agree, Stacy. A 12-year-old is a complete different witness than a much younger child. The other piece of this is this defense necessarily means that they're going to say, this 12-year-old was wrong, or this 12-year-old was lying. That's a hard position to take when you've got an eyewitness who the prosecution has said saw the father stab the mother repeatedly.
Yeah, well, certainly there are still a lot of questions about what is going to happen in this trial. Court continues next week. It is on a break today. Remember, Jeremiah Monell faces life in prison without parole if convicted. Lots of questions about who we will see on the stand and how the defense will argue its case that it wasn't Jeremiah Monell. You want to make sure to tune in as the trial continues next week. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have the other big trials we're looking ahead to this year. Welcome back to the Morning Docket. I'm Stacy Delicat in for Jesse Weber. Well, we are just 4 days into the new year already. A lot of high-profile trials on our radar. We've been talking about the Jeremiah Monell case out of New Jersey, and we know next week we'll have big cases out of California, out of Michigan, where the Uber driver is on trial for murdering 6 people randomly. So a lot coming up in this new year, even more trials than that. So we have now a little preview of what you can expect in the year ahead.
I'm Anthony Velez, and here are the top upcoming trials of 2019. The quadruple homicide trial of Charles Chase Merritt, the man accused of fatally beating a business associate, his wife, and their 2 preschool children, is set to begin on January 7th, 2019. The 61-year-old suspect is facing charges in connection to the disappearance of business associate Joseph McStay, his wife, Summer, and their young sons, 4-year-old Gianni and 3-year-old Joey Jr., from their home in Fallbrook in 2010. The family's remains were discovered in the Mojave Desert in 2013, and Merritt was arrested in 2014. Merritt represented himself for a short period, but later sought legal assistance. Merritt now faces the death penalty if convicted. The trial of the retired Tampa police captain who claims he fatally shot another man in self-defense during a dispute at a movie theater is scheduled to begin on February 25th, 2019. 75-year-old Curtis Reeves reportedly fatally shot Chad Olson inside the Cobb Grove 16 after the 2 men argued over Olson's use of a cell phone during previews. Olson allegedly approached Reeves and threw a bag of popcorn at him before Reeves drew his gun and fatally shot Olson. Reeves tried to claim a stand your ground defense, but a judge rejected the defense argument, and that decision was upheld on appeal. His defense team will reportedly argue self-defense at trial. Reeves is now facing a second-degree murder charge. The trial of the Georgia man accused of killing an 11th grade history teacher in Ocilla is set to begin in April 2019. The defendant, Ryan Duke, was arrested in 2017 in connection with Tara Grinstead's 2005 disappearance and death. Duke and another man, Bo Dukes, reportedly told friends at a party a month after Grinstead's disappearance that they killed Grinstead and burned her body. Duke now faces multiple charges, including felony murder. Bo Dukes faces charges of concealing a death, tampering with evidence, and hindering the apprehension or punishment of a criminal. A man accused of killing his pregnant ex-girlfriend and a police officer who tried to arrest him in Florida will stand trial in May. Marquis Floyd is accused of fatally shooting his ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon, on December 10, 2016, before shooting Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton when she tried to arrest him in January 2017. Lloyd reportedly lost the use of one of his eyes while being apprehended by authorities, claiming he suffered an unprovoked police attack. Lloyd now faces the death penalty. The trial of Pan Hupp, the woman accused of killing a mentally disabled man in Missouri to cover up another murder in 2011, is set to begin in June. Prosecutors claim Hupp fatally shot 33-year-old Louis Gumpenberger to divert attention for the murder of Betsy Faria, whose husband, Russ Faria, she framed for the killing in 2011. Hupp was the star witness in Faria's first murder trial, resulting in a guilty verdict. Faria was later acquitted during a second trial. Hupp now faces a charge of first-degree murder for Gumpenberger's killing. The two suspects, accused of killing a Florida State law professor in a murder-for-hire plot in 2014, will face a jury in June 2019. The suspects, Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua, reportedly hired a hitman, Luis Rivera, who allegedly drove from Miami to Tallahassee and fatally shot Dan Markle. Rivera took a plea deal to a lesser charge of second-degree murder in exchange for his testimony against Garcia and Magbanua. Investigators believe the suspects were hired by Markle's ex-wife's family to kill Markle over a custody dispute, but no family members have been charged. The suspects now face charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. The ex-wife of NBA star Lorenzo Wright is set to stand trial for his murder in November 2019. Shira Wright and her cousin, Billy Turner, are accused of conspiring to kill Wright in 2010 when Wright's body was found with multiple gunshot wounds in Tennessee. The pair allegedly had a co-conspirator, Wright's cousin, convicted killer Jimmy Martin, who allegedly assisted with the cleanup of the crime scene. Martin turned state's witness, leading investigators to the murder weapon, which was tossed in a lake in Walnut, Michigan. Wright now faces a charge of first-degree murder, but won't face the death penalty if convicted. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime, and those were the top upcoming trials of 2019.
Well, certainly a lot of interesting courtroom activity we expect to see in the coming year. Lots of high-profile trials from all over the country. Judge Ashley Willcott, I know as it was playing, you mentioned one of the murder cases, the 11th grade teacher in Georgia who was murdered by Duke. You said a lot of people are talking about that one.
Absolutely. In Georgia, that's big news. She was a high school teacher, and Duke allegedly was at that school at some point in time and knew her or knew of her. Not sure what the motive is, but they were relieved when her body was found, and they have a defendant.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly see how that one plays out. I think the movie theater shooting with the retired officer, also a lot of attention. You know, you go to the movies, get in a fight with someone over your cell phone, wind up dead, you know. So we'll see. He is arguing stand your ground, as we heard Anthony say there. Lots to look ahead to in the coming year. In the meantime, we know there were a lot of big moments in court last year and a lot of surprising moments that were caught on camera right in the courtroom. Let's take a look back at some of those highlights from the past year.
I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime, and here are your top 5 caught on court camera moments of 2018. Number 5.
God! God! God!
A suspect in a double murder was denied bond in a Florida courtroom after screaming from a wheelchair during his bond hearing. 19-year-old Damon Kemp is accused of the fatal shooting of 19-year-old Trey Ingraham and 19-year-old Jordan Payton at their home in Daytona Beach. Kemp, who was reportedly staying with the two victims at their home, is seen being disruptive during his bond hearing.
God! God! God!
I've reviewed your arrest warrant to determine whether there's probable cause for your arrest.
That?
Kemp now faces 2 counts of second-degree murder. Number 4. A crazy melee unfolded in a Florida courtroom after a guilty verdict was read in a murder trial. Video shows the eruption of violence after the verdict was delivered in a murder trial with 4 defendants. 3 of the co-defendants can be seen brawling with their own defense attorneys and court bailiffs. Once order was restored to the court, all 4 defendants were sentenced to life in prison. The 4 men were convicted in the shooting death of 28-year-old Courtney London in 2016. Number 3. A man in Oregon was caught on camera trying to grab an officer's service weapon during his trial in a Lincoln County courtroom. 27-year-old Scott Patrick Lemon can be seen quickly standing up and unsuccessfully lunging for the gun of a Newport police officer before being tackled to the ground by another officer. Lemon was convicted for robbing 2 guests at a beachfront condo in Newport with a fake gun. Number 2. A judge in Washington state played the role of court officer and chased down 2 handcuffed inmates who made a run for sweet freedom in his courtroom. The inmates, 22-year-old Tanner Jacobson and 28-year-old Cody Howard, saw an opportunity to escape and went for it. That's when Judge R.W. Buzzard surprised everyone and leapt into action, chasing down the fleeing inmates. Buzzard was able to apprehend Howard before he exited the building. Jacobson was caught by officers a few blocks away. Here's the #1 caught on court camera moment.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Villegas, not guilty of...
Daniel Villegas was found not guilty of murder, ending a 25-year saga that included 3 trials and appeals. Villegas faced capital murder charges for the 1993 fatal shooting of 2 teens in El Paso and served 18 years in prison prior to his acquittal. Villegas, who was 16 at the time of the killings, faced his first trial in 1994, which ended in a mistrial, but was convicted during a second trial a year later, receiving a life sentence. The bittersweet moment of his acquittal was caught on court camera.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Villegas, not guilty of...
That was the #1 caught on court camera moment. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
You know, that's one I don't get tired of watching. I'm sure you're the same, Ashley. I mean, just the joy, the emotion, the cheers from his family. Daniel Villegas, I mean, 25 years working his way through the legal system, 3 trials, you know, first arrested at 16 for a murder he always claimed he did not commit, and then finally, after all of this time, justice is served. I think that those wrongful conviction ones always are amazing to see.
They really are. It gives me chills to watch because he served 18 years, and so to know that somebody served 18 years and then was acquitted in the end is really, because he's always said he didn't do it, and now a jury's found he didn't do it, is frightening, but also joyful that he is now out of prison.
Yeah, absolutely, and it would be interesting to follow up with him later this year. You know, how is he doing? How is he making up for all that time lost? Would be good to hear from him. I'm sure he's probably pursuing legal action against the state and county as well. So, you know, we earlier talked about some of the big stories coming up in 2019, and I think we're also going to see a lot happening in court about the Me Too movement. In 2018 and 2017, we first heard all the allegations come out one by one. Now we'll actually see these cases play out in court. Harvey Weinstein, and you mentioned another good one, Kevin Spacey, we may see how that plays out in court up ahead as well.
That's right, and those are going to be really important trials to follow because it also sets the stage for any of those types of claims. When women do come forward, what happens with these really powerful, rich individuals who are accused? So those two are going to be very important trials.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think in a lot of the cases, you know, Les Moonves at CBS, elsewhere, right, they're just settlements. A lot of cases, non-disclosure agreements, you know, the victims, the accusers get paid and that's it. I know, interestingly, I think in California, there's a new law going into effect that clamps down on non-disclosure agreements in those kind of cases. So for sure, I think it will be a very interesting year in terms of the Me Too legal movement and how that plays out. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Law and Crime Rewind is back. We are talking about the Anthony Kirkland sentencing retrial. You may remember it, out of Ohio. When we come back, we will walk you through all of the highlights of that. Did he get the death penalty again? We'll see right after this break.